And then there we go. Okay, so it's being recorded and I can go in my little Panopto tool and edit out this little bit here. Second thing I'm going to do is share my screen and share. All right. I think that went smoothly. Everybody seeing me, you can see me, you can hear me, and you can see a screen that says exploring the 5 themes of world history. So, first of all, thank you very much for being here. I am so excited to do this. Please feel free to type in the chat and or come off mute if you have any questions. I'm going to dive in. One of the things that I love to do when I'm teaching history is to explain that history is like everything that ever happened and every experience that any human that's ever lived on the planet had. So none of us know it all, okay? So we have come up with ways to make it easier to understand history, to learn history, and to focus on what interests us by going through the window of themes. Okay, so I am going to start just kind of with a little bit on history. What is history? And I'm starting with 2 guys who actually have a lot in common. They're both Greek. They both lived a few thousand years ago, and they were both made out of marble, which works really well for my lecture because I'm going to be talking about geographic features and how we use natural resources. And so here's an example. So the first one is Aristotle, who is really the first one to use the word history, and it meant it was historia, not hysteria, historia in ancient Greek, and it means inquiry, okay, to find out, to investigate. And the second person here is Herodotus, who wrote the histories. And it's really interesting. Like, first, Aristotle started using this word for a very structured philosophical understanding of how to understand the natural world, how to understand living things, how to use observation to really as the first essential step in the scientific method. And so history in many ways was the scientific method of finding out what happened in the past. And then Herodotus used this concept when he was traveling around all these cool places, Persia, Egypt, the whole Mediterranean, and he acted like a private investigator, right? He acted like he went in and he asked questions, he collected evidence, he put it all together, and he created stories. So that's what history is, right? Now, I wanted you to just consider typing in the chat, like, what kind of stuff would you collect if you were traveling around and you were trying to understand what happened in the past. So go ahead and just go for it. Just think about, yeah, good. Sage said oral stories. This is so huge because when we go back further and further and further, people didn't write. So we had to have verbal testimonies. And Herodotus actually wrote a number of those. Good one. Okay, cool. I'm gonna go like that. Okay, so also I see art. Good one, Emily. I think, because artists are not just seeing what they create in their mind, but they're also writing about stuff that are creating art that is a depiction of their own experience in the world. That's huge. Maps is a really good one. Textiles. Oh, that's so good. Yeah. This is the thing is that if you're a historian, you're going back and you're collecting physical evidence. So textiles are excellent. Yeah, Shannon, the languages, the way that people communicate, the written and the verbal. clothing, food, good, currency. Good one, Dylan. Cash. um, yes, Sydney, rocks, old photos. I think archaeology is, I know for Raquel, that's one of our favorites, right? We love archaeology. I know Summer loves rocks. Cool. Pottery. Yeah. Music. Yeah. So you can imagine as you start to collect all these things, you start to put a pretty vibrant picture of the past together. So then the next thing is why? Why are we going to want to know history? History is like a long time ago in many cases. Everybody's gone. Why do we care what all these people did in the past? And I feel like this is the number one question that I get from students is, why do I have to learn this? How is this going to help me? And so I often talk about how when you start to clarify a picture of the past, it's almost like you're putting humans into a petri dish and you get to study them and they get to make the mistakes. They get to do amazing things that inspire you. They get to do stupid things that make you think, what, why? They do all sorts of things. They experiment for us. And some things work out really well and some things don't. And so I've always felt like when I studied history, I was trying to learn what works and what doesn't work. And I also kind of creating a sense of empathy because I'm blown away by how much people accomplish with so little. And yet I'm also like inspired to be able to do that, but also go further because we have more at our fingertips now. And we're not as dependent on just survival needs. So it's really kind of beautiful. I also feel like we become fortune tellers in a way because when you look at the past and you see what people did, then you're like, yeah, we don't want to do that anymore because if you keep doing that, this is what's going to happen. It's happened before here and here and here during these time periods. And then, of course, it ends up happening. So historians tend to be kind of manic depressives who can see all the stuff happening and go, oh no, my species, what are you doing? Stop. This has happened before. And we're at one of those moments in history right now. So, anything else that you want to put in the chat with regard to why we should learn history? Allie nailed it. Allie said we learn from those mistakes from history, and I think that is what we're supposed to do. And oftentimes, people who repeat history, they do it intentionally because they know what's going to happen, or they do it unintentionally because they have no idea. And if they did know, they wouldn't have done it. Yes. Shannon says those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And that is an amazing. I actually used to have Luca, you might remember this. I used to have a quotes. I think I had this quote in my listing in some of my classes. That's so awesome. Okay, so let's keep on going. Now I'm going to talk about themes. I'm going to give you the 5 themes, but I just want to explain one more time what it is about themes, why it is that we do themes. Okay. And so, and I'm just going to run through here. Anybody, if anybody is off mute, if you can just check your mute button. Okay. So, 4 reasons that just stand out incredibly. Number one, space and time. I already talked about it. History is everything that ever happened, and we just can't know all of it. So, focusing on themes helps us narrow in, right? Second, individual human experience. Carrie just typed in the chat, empathy. Yes, we have human experiences that are happening in droves and we cannot know all of them, but we can take collective human experiences to best understand. Okay, next, understanding human behavior. So when we dive in and just look at gender roles, this tells us a whole lot about the way people thought about gender in the past, the way that people treat one another when they consider what gender someone else is. So we start to really understand it's very psychological to look at themes. Okay. And then the last one is that holistic approach. My dad loves puzzling. He's always working on his puzzles, one teeny piece at a time. When you take themes, it's almost like you're taking a section of the puzzle and you're putting those pieces together to create a little picture, slowly adding on and adding on until you have this big, beautiful picture. Okay, so the 5 themes, what are they? Okay, very first one is geography. Geography shapes human societies, and it's probably the biggest influence on our survival and on our experience in our life. I'll get into each one of these. Next one is religious beliefs. Um, this is so much about people throughout history asking the most important questions, the big questions. Why are we here? What is this all? How did we get here? What is happening here? There's something magic happening here. So we're going to look at spirituality and practices. Third one is political structures. In many ways, there's an element of power in each one of these themes, but political structure by far is the biggest element of power. And it is where we see power struggle. It's where we see us put into the haves and the have-nots. It's also where we see amazing amounts of development and organization and management. So there are pros and cons to each one of these themes and the way that humans interact. The fourth one, social and cultural characteristics. And I think for a lot of us, this is some of our favorite stuff. I want to throw a piece of technology at you tonight just to entice you, but it comes down to the idea that we our external expressions are actually reflections of our internal beliefs and imagination. And its innovation's incredible. And then economy, because we, in different parts of the world at different times, put emphasis on different types of materials for value. And so I'm going to get into that too. So those are the 5 themes. So we're going to start with geography. And one of the reasons this is the most important, and I want everybody to think about this, think about where you are right now in the world, where you live. You also, if you don't want to do that one, you can also pick a place that you used to live or a place that you want to go or that you've been. Okay. But you start to think about the fact that throughout history, humans need the natural world. Humans are part of the natural world. So what we eat, what we drink, what we make our clothes with, what we build our homes with, what we create tools, weapons, our art, our culture, our monetary systems, everything comes from the natural world. So think about where you are. And I want to pull this up really quick. Go ahead and just think about like the number one geographic feature near you that's most important if you consider either where you are or a place you've been. I'm in Bend, Oregon. You guys all know that. And we're at the base of the beautiful mountains. Carrie nailed it with the river. Yep, the water. People come here for nature. And so that water, that river right there, that provided the drinking water. It provided the fish that people ate. It provided the transportation. When the logging industry started here, they transported logs down the river. Then we move into economies like microbrewing, tons of water for beer. And then we end up with the whole recreation industry here. And it all revolves around that river that Carrie and I live by. Yeah, the coast. Allie, throughout history, the coast is the main artery for transportation, right? So good. So keep thinking about personalizing this is going to make this more fun. The desert, yes, Dylan. The desert. It is an amazing place, and there are lots of resources there, and many people didn't live there until we got modern technology. Yeah. Space for vegetation, farming, land for farming. Yep. Oh yeah, Luca, Lake Superior, that has such a crazy history. So important. The Mississippi River. You can do an entire lecture on the five themes around the Mississippi River. So the placement of continents, the climate, all kind of determine migration over time. That is huge. We also find, like my picture on this slide, this is during the Ice Age, this top picture, and you've got all this area around the globe that is uninhabitable. So it makes sense in the bottom picture that these are the climate zones where we start to see the first societies grow into civilizations, where we see all the five themes. And it's because the natural world provides exactly what those people need. And that's huge. And still to this day, without getting into any of the stuff that's going on politically and historically right now, we still find things like oil that make huge impacts on people's decisions, on power structures, where people live, and their economies. So, when it comes to the bodies of water, mountains, deserts, and natural features, we see them as not just boundaries, right? We will see geographic boundaries because of certain um, different aspects in the topography. We also see, like for instance, Greece. You will see it's an archipelago. And so what happens in Greece historically is they end up with a very fragmented political system where each one of those different islands have their own governments. Whereas you see another place, that is connected entirely, that has one capital city and more of a federal government, more of a unified system. So natural borders, um, water for trade routes, the ability to trade and to move. When we talk about deserts, I always think about the Sahara, the largest desert in the world, and how few cities you find because of the lack of resources, and how difficult the trade industry was for a very long period of time. There's a whole history just on the camel and how that one animal changed everything in North Africa and the Middle East. Um, but it also protects people too. So we do a lot with natural barriers that are protective. Um, I think when it comes to flora and fauna and the natural resources that we dig out of the ground or we cut down, or um, this one is mind-boggling. Think about this for a minute. And some of you, just because of what you do for a living, um, just think about what we use plants for, historically and today. Think about what we use trees for. Go ahead and type in the chat. Um, yeah, medicine, housing, paper. Oh, good. Yep, medicine. Oh, shading. That's actually really important in a big portion of the world, Sydney. Awesome. Clothing, fuel. And fuel's interesting because when you study environmental history, we talk a lot about peat in Scotland, and it's called fuel. When you read the old documents, they're talking about peat, it's fuel, and they use the word fuel. Yeah, Carrie, furniture. Like just think about all of our amenities, every amenity made out of something that was pulled out of the ground. Energy. Oh, Dylan nailed it. Yeah. I think that energy, just the whole study of energy through time, you see how ingenious people are, and you also see how scientific discoveries happen because of this need for fuel, for energy. Good. And yes, Emily, food and oxygen. And that is something that we need to get better at for sure. The oxygen part. Okay, so just to nail down this first theme, we look at geographic location and all the different elements within the bodies of water, mountains, deserts, what comes out of the ground. Um, it's interesting, like when you go to a particular place, uh, and all of a sudden you see, wow, like all the buildings here are made of one thing. I remember going to Aberdeen in Scotland, and they call it the Granite City. And you think of what people like, uh, you know, how much they pay for a granite top on their counter, and then you're looking at a whole city made of granite. You think of like the use of sandstone and limestone in Egypt. You think about bamboo in parts of the world. You think about, yeah, it's just amazing how culture is different because of what comes out of the ground. And something that Sydney and a couple others pointed out, fertile soil, not fertile soil. The agricultural revolution, which is a whole topic on its own, really was dependent on the natural world to feed the most people. And where you can feed the most people when you don't have transportation is where the biggest populations are. So even to this day, when you look at the biggest cities in the world, they are either on water where they can get everything they need, or they are in fertile areas where they can grow their food. And that's how they get those populations. Animals, indigenous animals, are going to contribute to just about everything from food to labor to our clothing, all sorts of things. And then, of course, the climate. And you definitely see a population in a nice, a nice area where the climate is very easy to live in. That population's going to be way bigger than like, up in the Yukon. Okay, so religious beliefs. When we look at religious beliefs, I said this earlier, these are the big questions. These are the answers to who are we? Where do we come from? What happens when we die? Why do we die? Who's in charge here? I always think about that. Who's in charge here? It does feel like early on in history, a lot of belief systems are looking for a hierarchy outside of themselves to see, you know, who's in control because this place is chaos. So, if you have any other ideas and you want to type in the chat, just go ahead and type in what you think of when you think of spiritual beliefs and religion and why they are ubiquitous all over the world throughout history. And what we'll do is kind of look at a little bit of an evolution of them. Okay, so uh, one of the first things that we see going all the way back to our earliest evidence, people who had no writing, very little technology. We go back to people that lived in caves, and what we see is an element of shamanism or animism. Animism is really providing these attributes, kind of assigning attributes to the natural world, exploring the natural world and the energy and the actions that come from that natural world and giving them that spiritual attribute. And so you are going to have rain gods, you're going to have sun gods, you're going to have all sorts of animals that are almost in a spiritual hierarchy because of what they offer the people who live in those territories. And again, it is ubiquitous all over the world. Um, the earliest spiritual traditions, we see explanation for why things happen. We also see ritual and practices that, yeah, Kyle, that was excellent. I think the the giving definition to the unexplainable. Um, and what you also see too is that early on in this early stage of human development, you see that people who are shamans, who are carrying out these rituals and have a spiritual title in their community, they're more like doctors. They're practicing medicine. They're also psychologists. They're also, in many ways, the wisdom keepers, but the ones that are going to manage ethics and how people should live their life. And so it is kind of the very beginning of creating, these are the reasons why we need to behave in certain ways. And so you do find those are the big questions that everyone is answering. Yeah, I think today, Carrie, and I think I'm gonna touch on that in a minute. The level of oppression that we see today and for the last, especially the last 2000 years, um, really comes from a transfer of power. I said earlier, political structures are the ones that really have the power, right? But the truth is that religious structures were created in order to usurp power, in order to take it from the political structure, or the political structure kind of embedded a religious infrastructure within them in order to share that power, because they realized that when you know, have all the answers to the unexplained, you have power. And so we see that kind of marrying together in what we call a theocracy. Um, and that's big. That's a big shift in history, because for a long time, going all the way back through the ancient world and up through really up until the advent of the monotheistic belief systems, you do see that there's the spiritual world over here with the different spiritual leaders and practices and rituals. And then there's the political world over here with the military and the political power and taxation and so forth. So the development and the spread of these religions over time actually give us a real indication of what was important to people at the time. And you will see a level of, in some cases, desperation. Um, where when we go back to animism and shamanism and many tribal belief systems, people said, hey, we believe this, 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 and this, and that's because we live here. These are our natural resources. You know, this is what we see in the sky. This is what we see from the natural world around us. These are the explanations we came up with. But those people over there, they have a different belief system because they live over there. And so their belief system is more, you know, about where they originated from. We really see that there isn't as much of this attempt to convert, to proselytize, to force people to convert, all up until we get to about the 2000 year ago mark, that, yeah, little 2100 years ago, where we start to see this kind of forced conversion where people are saying, you have to believe in what we believe in. So, yeah, it's really, really interesting how that happens. I love that, the mysteries of moving stars and planets. You know, when we think about what we spend our time looking at, it's most likely a screen and not the sky, except for Carrie and I. Sometimes we go on these moonwalks. But the thing is that you see, and Emily does too, you see the amount of time that people had and how they started record keeping, even through oral tradition, about the shifts in the sky, about the seasons, about the way that the world changed with the seasons, and how humans also went through cycles, how women went through cycles. All of these things were very tied to the earliest belief systems, whereas we start to see a real hard-coded theology as we move into the later part of the ancient world. And then we see that conversion. And then what happens is, as people go out and migrate and political structures go out and conquer, they're taking with them the belief system as much as they are the political power. Okay. So, yeah, the global impact is crazy. This last slide here is something that I always bring up with students, which is, I know there are a lot of people who practice different belief systems, and they often feel like they are practicing an original belief system. But the truth is that every religion on the planet has gone through an evolution. It has changed different practices and beliefs. And over time, it is not necessarily the same as it was of the founders. I used to have an assignment that I would give students where they would do a dinner party and they would invite like the Buddha and Jesus and Muhammad and Krishna and all these different people and have these really important conversations over dinner. And those are great papers. But I think it helped students in my world religions courses to understand that um, what those those people intended to happen um, has not panned out that way. And not only that, but as we have this cultural diffusion and this global movement of people going around all over the globe, often looking for resources, we see the spreads and the blending of traditions. And from those, we end up with entirely new philosophies. And so that is something to really consider is just where we are now is something very, very different than what we studied in the past. And so another reason for studying history is very much about understanding how we have changed the beliefs and the practices of the past. Okay, so this one is going to be very hard probably for you to read. I am sending this to you. I wanted to put these two guys in there. One of them is a professor from Cambridge, and one of them is John Hospers from Rutledge. And what they did is they talked about they both are two of the heavyweights when it comes to understanding world religions and the history of religion. And they've done two very different things where they've made lists. You know how with geography, I kind of went through that list of what all the geographic characteristics are that we study. With religion, you can do it a couple different ways. Now, SMART is going to say, look, every one of these have got both a practical and a ritual dimension to them. Every one of these have a very experiential and like having spiritual experiences and emotional impacts. Every one of these have a narrative. They have some kind of mythic dimension. Every one of them have a doctrine and a philosophy. Every one of them have ethics or legal dimensions, the thou shalt not, okay? And every one of them have social and material dimensions. And so that is one way of looking at it. Another is what John Hospers does, where he goes through and he talks about every one of them has like some form of prayer, some form of supernatural being, some form of, monolithic architecture, some kind of legal code embedded and so forth. So you know a religion when you see it because it has these characteristics. Oh yeah, Allie. I love Don Miguel. Yeah, with the four agreements. That is beautiful. That's Toltec wisdom that Allie's talking about there, and it is gorgeous. Okay, political structure. And this is the last big one because I feel like geography, religion, and politics, these are huge. And when you study history, there's a lot going on with these. I think we have a little more fun, a little more air when we're moving through the social and cultural and the monetary tonight. But each one of you will get videos on each of these topics and I can do deeper dives. One of the things that I wanted to do when talking about political structures is to note that they are very different depending on where you are in the world, depending on your history, depending on the religious history of your past, and depending on a handful of very dynamic individuals throughout history. We do have people that have done things that just change political systems like that. People like Constantine, right? We're just gonna, we're just gonna, you know, move the Roman Empire. Then we're gonna convert everybody to Christianity. We're gonna, We're going to redo the Bible. Yeah. Henry VIII. We're just going to divorce the Pope and create our own Church of England. Okay. So there's lots of examples of dynamic people that just take it into their own hands, right? But we do have lots of different political systems. Living in the United States, I think a lot of people know that there's democracy and there's also, authoritarianism. But there's lots of nuances to all of those. So they've got good ones on here. The one that was missing, I could not find a graphic that had matriarchy. I am going to talk about that because it's wonderful. Not very common, but it's wonderful. um, so early forms of political structures really start out with family dynamics. Every family has kind of a political structure, even if it's an extended family like a clan, where there are people that make certain decisions. They have been given this responsibility by a small group of people, entrusted. Also, there are just lineages of passing certain responsibilities down through the family. And so we see clans as social units that have a power structure in them. So that would be the very basic political structure. And I think actually my dad would admit my mom was the head of our political structure. I don't know what you guys think. But then what happens is when you have clans, I mean, you don't want a lot of intermarrying in clans because there's a lot of close familial ties there. So we do start to see, especially where you have a number of clans in a territory that's all relying on similar resources, those clans coming together to create kind of the greater, we use the term tribes. It's not always used in many parts around the world. But you do see that. You do see this kind of expansion from the clan unit to more of a tribal unit. And then it goes out from there. But the earliest are usually going to have to do with the ease that everybody could get together to make decisions. Okay. So if you go, let's just drop back in American history to our Native peoples. You definitely had barriers. There were certain groups that got together, and there are others that did not come that far. They got together with other groups. So you see that geography plays a part. Okay, so I want to go through some of these pictures because these are fun. So in political structures, we often see patriarchies. That's the dominating type of political structure that we see. I've got a picture here with the pilgrims. I've also got the Pope. And down there in the middle, I've got King Henry, who I just mentioned, who had that's Henry VIII. He had a lot of wives. He killed a lot of wives. He also divorced the Pope so that he could get a divorce because the Pope wouldn't let him get a divorce. So dynamic characters, that's kind of another theme. But I wanted to point out three of the pictures. The one in the corner is a great a bowl that has the Amazonian women from ancient Anatolia, Greece, the eastern part of Greece. And then if you move over to the other side of Henry VIII, I surrounded him by women on purpose. The Haudenosaunee, this is the Iroquois League, were a matriarchy. So women were a lot of land, a lot of responsibilities, and marriages, kind of went through the female line. So there was very special honor given to the maternal line. And then over there, you have the Nubian matriarchy. And Nubia is, of course, just south of Egypt in Africa. And that was women calling the shots, even in politics and military. Okay, so I am not going to read these quotes. Like I said, I'm going to send this to you. But one of the things when we talk about political structures through history is then all of a sudden people are like, oh no, they already tried that. It didn't work. And then you start to realize, God, we're dealing with a decrepit political structure. Lots of countries have been through this. The United States is obviously going through it right now. So I have two quotes here. One is by John Burton, which really talks about how it's a time for conflict analysis, resolution, and problem solving, that these old systems aren't working. It's time to be innovative. And that comes from the Journal of Peace Studies. And then I've got one here that is Gloria. Gloria Arroyo was, when I was living in Scotland, she was the president of the Philippines. And she essentially says it needs to move away from personalities and patronage to a system of party programs and consultation with the people. And I think that's a really good way to put it. We have a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. Okay, so I just want to, I have this, which is your list of characteristics again. And then, the idea that you've got a sovereign body, with a supreme authority, you've got territorial boundaries and the group of people within it, bureaucratic leaders, legal codes, taxation, military, buildings for all of that, and a hierarchy for sure, and then an ideology. Okay. So now those are the three big themes. The last ones are really easy to cover and I think easy for everybody to understand. So I just want to ask, do you see the blending between the themes? Can you think about, okay, how would geography affect political structure or political structure affect geography? How does geography affect religious beliefs or religious beliefs affect geography? Do you know what I mean? And then the blending with the religious and the political. Go ahead and type in the chat. I see good stuff here too. Yeah, powerful families marrying for that nepotism, Sydney. Yeah, and that all those weird marriages. Very creepy throughout history when families are like giving off a daughter to go marry someone to make some kind of a political deal. Yeah, Henry VIII definitely had a personal agenda. Yeah, technology, that's excellent, Kyle, because I think when we look at the blending of themes, technology comes a lot from human inspiration. It comes from human uh, survival. It's ingenious, it's curious, it's all of this creativity that humans are capable of, but they can't create it without the natural world. So geography and technology go together hand in hand. And it's technology that also corrupts geography as much as the geography itself is producing what we need for the technology. That was good. Lots of blending. Yeah, Shannon. That Nile River. And it's interesting that Nile River, all of Egypt is right along that river, and so you do have a political system that evolves right along that river. It's a very and it's so much about their ability to produce so much food, transportation. That river was power. That's the most powerful river. I think the Amazon is a close second, but that one in Egypt. And when you have a geographic feature that is power, then politics is going to go there. Yeah, transportation. That is so huge because people end up moving to gain more power, to spread religion, and to find natural resources. So you see a big blending there. Yeah. I think those precious resources are something that are romanticized for a big chunk of history where everybody starts to go, ooh, ooh, did you hear about the spices, coming out of India? And then all of a sudden everybody's going to India to get spices, especially people from places that had very bland food like Britain. Or the discovery of rubber, these trees that can make rubber, that just created a mass migration of people to go get rubber. Think about the tobacco industry. That was huge. Once people got their hands on tobacco, sugar. If you can think of other ones, I think that's, yeah, precious resources, Sydney. It's so huge. Okay, so when we go to, oh, gold, of course. Oh, coffee. Yeah. Those are the big ones. Those are big. And you know, it's interesting when you look at politics and geography together. One of the things that I did, I wrote a chapter in an anthology book, and it was about the environmental history during the revolutionary periods around the Americas. And when you look at some of the revolutionary battles in South America, you can talk all about the men who were doing this and their technology and this battle and that battle and strategy and money and power. But really, the mosquito won that whole thing. So sometimes you do have something in nature that is just has a huge impact. Okay, so I love this one. I love this one because one of the reasons I love humans and studying humans is because, oh my gosh, Dylan wrote silk. Yes, that is huge. The silk trade is one of the biggest ones that tied the East to the West. Yeah, that was a good one. Um, I just love what people create. I love the sculpture and the art and the music and all these different reflections. And it's one of the reasons I love travel so much is because every place I go, I'm like, oh, wow, I've never seen that before. That's amazing. And then you start to realize there's a whole history that was cultivated about, or that is cultivated from being creative. And that is where humans are at their best. Where the political structure, it feels like humans are not at their best always. You definitely see humans at their best when it comes to these creative expressions. Whoops. Um, now, I think some of the things that I love to do when I'm looking at a particular place and time is to really dive into the art, the music, and the literature, um, because that is that juicy place that you can see real deep creativity. Some of the pictures I have in here, I wanted to point out the one up in the corner, which is the earliest picture that we have of early powwow up in the Pacific Northwest, and the instruments and the costume, the regalia, and the music that they created, just unbelievable, unbelievable. But also just the beauty in art and literature. We don't always know what music sounded like in the ancient world. We have beautiful descriptions of it, but we have the instruments, and it's going to be interesting through research what we can do with some of the newer evidence that we found. Gender roles and classes get really interesting. Women haven't fared very well. They do up until we get into these really heavily religiously and politically structured societies where women tend to take a back seat, if not, a very quiet, oppressed role. And it's interesting too how you could look at something like class distinctions and then look at fashion and see what the fashion represents. There's lots of studies on certain hairdos, the corset, right? There's some geographic history. There's some environmental history. Those corsets that the women had to squeeze into were made of whale bone. They almost made the right whale go extinct, okay, up in the North Atlantic because they were making all those corsets. Um, but you do find hairstyles, even shoe styles, different types of clothing that kind of represent your class distinction, but also have an underlying level of suppression. Suppression is very big in fashion. And I think a lot of times just the study of everyday life is when you can liberate yourself from that, where you see that regardless of all the things we've talked about so far, every day people loved their children and wanted to feed them and clothe them and take care of them. There was play that happened that we don't have lots of evidence for. There's all the tender moments, all the love, all of these things that humans have that we just don't get to see from the past always. So studying everyday life can actually kind of renew that, that feeling. If you feel like, oh my gosh, these people were struggling so much. I'm so glad I didn't live back then. The technology. Here is my big giveaway tonight. This is the Antikythera. And I just, out of curiosity, I don't think Kim made it tonight. I don't think she found Wi-Fi at Lake Mead. Um, but Kim went with me to Greece. And when I took students, we did a Greece and Turkey, and we saw this in Athens in the museum. This is a computer. And that's all I'm going to say. It's thousands of years old and it's a computer. So any of you that are interested in computers, please Google this and have some fun. I've also got ship technology. One of the funnest things to talk about, it can be a little depressing, is when we talk about these people like Columbus and Hong Shih and all these, these big seafarers that have these reputations. Sometimes we don't realize that the shipping technology often came from a totally different place. Um, Columbus came to the Caribbean with a Chinese rudder, sails, and yeah, it's just kind of, even the compass didn't actually come from where he was from. I've got a picture up here of the Chinese fireworks that cut off part of the firework. Fireworks were created originally for religious celebrations, annual celebrations, seasonal celebrations, and it was used then for gunpowder. And we see this advent of massive warfare coming from it. The telescope's a good one too. Love the sky. Okay, last one, and this is the economy. Um, you know, we like if you go back to the ancient world, one of the reasons that I always say, oh my gosh, people are amazing, is, they had to make their own clothes. They had to make their own food. They had to get their food out of the ground and turn it into something that's edible. They had to hunt animals. I mean, this is a very difficult lifestyle. But the thing is, nowhere on the globe did one person um did do you find like a whole group where one person's doing everything themselves. There is a shared economy. And so you have the hat maker, and you have someone who's a good cook, and you have someone who, is a good seamstress, and you have a good hunter, and so forth. And so these shared economies, oftentimes as a collective, they could really care for each other. But the truth is in order to get something that you valued, if you couldn't make it, create it yourself, you would exchange. And exchange goes on for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And it ends up kind of morphing from I'll give you this if you'll give me that to a monetary system. And the monetary system, when I say monetary, you think money, you think cash, you think coins, maybe. But the truth is, when you study history, you get into these little places where you see shells and you see salt and you see gold, you see lots of different commodities that are exchanged. And there is a fascinating history there because which one of the themes does it blend with? I'm just gonna, which one of the themes does the economy blend with? Yeah, there you go. Luke, I missed yours on music. Yeah, I think that is something that they're trying to use AI for, where they have like musical notes that are written and they're putting it into AI, and then they're trying to use the instruments from the time so they can hear it. Yeah, but also art and culture. Good, Shannon. That's awesome. Yeah, so it's just really interesting how creative people got. And also, salt is going to be super important to people who don't have it. And throughout history, lots of superstitions, lots of practices come from the use of salt. So you have places where they just have a plethora of salt. It becomes a great trade item. We see that a lot. And then my last one here is just about modern economies and globalization, because if we study economies in the past, we start to realize that, that piece of paper that has a president's face on it is only worth what we say it is. And so there's a lot of change that can happen in monetary systems where something is worth its weight in gold and then it's not. And we are not immune to that, even in globalized, well, especially in globalized economies, where the value of our money can, skyrocket and it can dip. And we're seeing now with crypto and Bitcoin and all of these new types of monetary systems, there is an unease. There's a lot of people that are not there yet, a lot of people that value it heavily, and a lot of people that don't. So we're in a volatile moment. And when you study history, you see volatile moments, and it's very easy to recognize. And right now we are in one. Yeah, Allie, I think they actually even stopped printing pennies, right? Like they're not even making them anymore, printing. That's not what you do with pennies, is it? So you guys, these are the 5 themes. And so the videos that I'll be sending to you are going to be me taking geography and making a video and I'm going to give very specific examples from history, and the collection will be the 5 themes. So there's never a specific place on the planet that I'm focusing on. There's never a specific theme that a specific time period that I'm focusing on. And it's just so that everybody feels really comfortable with the 5 themes. And then later courses will literally take a place like ancient Egypt and dive in and explore the themes, but then look at the chronological history and how those themes played out over time. So I'm going to stop sharing. I don't even know where my stop sharing is. There it is. There we go. Cool. And just make sure I didn't miss anything. Thank you. Thank you, Shauna. I want to thanks everybody for coming. I actually have a political structure commitment tonight because I'm on the board in my little higher ground community and we have a board meeting tonight. So I wanted to make sure to keep this as close to an hour as possible. I want to make sure I answer any questions, and then also just again, just want to say thank you. I love all of you and I'm so happy that you came. Thank you, Sydney. Thanks, Carrie. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Any homework? Oh yeah, Sage is all about homework. Sage is all about homework. One of the things that I'm going to send you is something that Dylan will remember. Um, and it's there is like you could pick a place. So let's say that you've always dreamed of going to Iceland. So you can take this graph and it basically has the 5 themes along the top, and then it has, um, the places that you want to go. So for Iceland, you would then go to geography and you'd study the geography of Iceland and fill in the box, right? Do you remember this, Dylan? And then you go to political structure and you talk about what the political structure, religious beliefs and so forth. And what ends up happening is that if you do this with a number of different places, you kind of get a feel. It makes you excited, makes you want to travel for sure, but it gets you kind of excited because then you realize how similar humans are. And that's a beautiful thing. I think right now at this time in world history, we need more compassion and empathy and love for one another. And when you study these themes, you have a huge sense of appreciation for all of these people. You also see where they go wrong, which teaches us kind of what to do and what not to do, which is really neat. So I think, Dylan, you did like, it was Mesopotamia, Egypt, yeah, India, China, yeah, and you can go through and kind of fill the stuff out. So I will send that. So Sage, if you want to sit and fill that out, you can hand it in to me. But anybody that ever wants to teach this, that's one of the best teaching tools once people understand the themes. And one of the things you can do even with your own kids or just as an exercise is do it for where you live to really understand where you live. Cool. Okay. I am going to say thank you one more time and I'm going to stop recording.